Michelle Sheridan, Vajra Kilgore, and Eve Harrison. Michelle Sheridan. Again, I know it's been a long day, long evening. Vajra Kilgore.
Hi, my name is Vajra Kilgore. And I would like to point out that while I believe I heard a number of 60,000 homeless people in New York City now, 60,000 homeless people in New York City, not one of them is a landlord. When tenants can't make ends meet, they wind up homeless. They wind up in a shelter. They wind up not having enough to eat. Not one landlord has come here and complained of not having enough to eat, of not having a roof over their head. They're afraid they might have to sell their building. That's what they say. And I'm sorry, but it seems as if the real estate industry was kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel today with regard to landlords who came in and testified, because a person with one scree tenant and everybody else is a market rate tenant wants you to fix that. I understand this is the one business where landlords are guaranteed a profit. There's no other business like it. But when tenants can't do it, they wind up homeless. They wind up by the thousands in housing court without a lawyer. The landlords have the lawyers. I live in West Harlem. I moved in the 1970s when the Bronx was burning and many people were moving out of West Harlem. Other people were moving in from Central Harlem because they were willing to pay a slightly higher rent to live in a nicer neighborhood and raise their kids. We had a great, stable, deeply integrated working class neighborhood. It was among the first to be gentrified. Now, none of us could afford to move to Central Harlem. $2,000 a month is $24,000 a year. That was about what I made while I was working. There would be nothing left over. And the rents have been, as you know, and you've heard it over and over again, that the landlords were awarded incredibly high increases over many years. What they did with that money, they appear to feel like they took it, they said thank you very much, and now they're back and saying, well, that money's all gone, all that extra money. Now we need more. It is so far not right to continue this constant raising of rents, to put rent-regulated housing in jeopardy as Albany has done. You might as well drop a bomb on the city. You might just as well, because in fact, working class people cannot live here. And working class people are the backbone of this country, the backbone of this city. We have made it what it is.
Thank you,
So
Ms.
what we
Kilgore.
need now is a rent roll back.
Thank you. Eve Harrison. Eve Harrison and Ernestine Temple on behalf of Assemblyperson Herman Denny Farrell, and then Richard Ward. Eve Harrison.
Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak to you. I am a native New Yorker, and I lived for years in New York. Never mind the reasons, because there's not much time. But I am American, native New Yorker. And when I moved back from Europe to accompany my mother, who also lived in Europe for a time, she sold a house there in Venice, Italy, and I accompanied her. It wasn't my choice, but the thing. So I was here. Can you hear me? Yes.
You're going to pick it up so you don't have to...
Thank you. I'm so shy, I don't know what to do with myself. Okay, thank you. I was looking for an apartment and not having much money because I'm an artist, actress, and freelance translator, etc. Do things that make money, but they're just not enough for me to be able to find a rental in New York City. I was told about the SRO Dexter House, SRO Hotel, and it is, in fact, the landlord is corrupt. The evidence that I have is that I just called the number that an Italian friend of mine who'd stayed in that building a long time ago, who now lives back in Europe, and yet they gave me the number of the building and the name of a man named Roger Taylor. So anyway, that's all I knew. I called the number and I spoke with the building, and they said, okay, come over. I just went by, and I just said the name Roger Taylor, and a man appeared, and he said, I'll show you some rooms. We have some rooms. And he said, okay, I'll show. And I'll look, it's an SRO, and it's, he said, low rent. I can't remember very well. It was in December. And he showed me the 3 different rooms, one smaller than the other, but very small. Anyway, it was 1,200 to up, is what I was told by this gentleman. Anyway, I went. I said, well, I don't know. I'm supposed to be able to make. I thought I could maybe make 1,200, but I didn't know what I was going to do. So I have to ask around friends, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I said I would. He brought me. Oh gosh, he brought me to Harlem to sit down and talk and to sign the contract.
I'm not sure if you heard.
I had to pay $300 to him.
There are no actions that we can take. If you have concerns about someone being corrupt, there are government bodies that you should be going to, but we just can't affect individual building
It doesn't have anything to
decisions.
do with helping it not being less and it standing up for.
No, again, it's really important for us to hear the stories, but we also still have a big pile. And so, again, it sounds like you have an individual story that requires attention, that requires help. And
It's added evidence of the situation regarding that
absolutely,
building.
and we do hear that. So thank you so much for testifying. And if this is continuing, again, the Housing Preservation Development, finding a lawyer, there are steps that you can take where the situation can be remedied. So again, you can get some information from us. Okay, thank you so much.
More rooms. The thing is, have a realtor agent. How does a realtor agency?
Ms. Harrison, they're really, again, we have to listen to other folks talk, and thank you so much. And we do want you to get help with the situation. We really do. Again, I understand that, but we don't have any authority over any individual building. We wish we did, but we don't. Well, maybe we don't wish we did, but we don't. We do. We hear that. Ernestine Temple.
Thank you, Rent Guidelines Board. Thank you, tenants and shareholders that are here today. I've been here since 3 o'clock and I'm tired, but I feel blessed. I'm here representing Assemblyman Herman Denny Farrell, who has, for his whole career, over 40 years, as being an assemblyman, has put tenants first. I will begin. Hello, my name is Ernestine Bell Temple, and I am a district leader in the 71st Assembly District, which includes Harlem, Washington Heights, and Inwood. And I am speaking before you today on behalf of Assemblyman Denny Farrell. He is required to be in Albany for the legislative session today, but he has asked me to read the following on behalf of his constituents who are urgently in need of assistance and justice that you may provide. Please allow me to say clearly and immediately, no rent increase this year. As a matter of fact, you must reduce the rents. People are struggling and suffering. You can and must help them. Costs go up. That is what they do. It is part of life. We all accept that. But in some cases, costs go down. That is what has been happening in the recent past. Years ago, the cost of doing business as a landlord rose steadily. The cost of heating and maintaining a building climbed steadily. But of late, those costs have gone down sharply in some cases. Heating oil, for instance, costs far less today than it did a few years ago. And yet the landlords cry out for help. They complain that their costs are exceeded by the revenues they collect as rent. This position runs contrary to the evidence, which we've all heard this afternoon. And yet, the landlords cry out for help. This position runs contrary to the evidence and to common sense. Think of the tenants. Last week, Friday, June 5th, the federal government reported that wages have gone up by an example of 0.3%. That is 0.003, a third of a penny for each dollar in earnings. And the increase is remarkable in its strength compared to the recent past. Now compare that to the growth in rent.
Ms. Temple, can I ask you to summarize real quickly?
Oh.
We have so many people to listen to, and it's so important to hear.
Thank you.
The Assemblyman.
I'm closing.
Thank you.
Now compare that to the growth in rents. This is not justice. As I say to you in the past, the landlords don't need your help to make more money. Please think of the tenants. People are suffering. You have it within your power to help. Again, please lower rents. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Ward, Ava Farkas, and Mary Lathrop. Richard Ward. Is Richard Ward still here? Ava Farkas? Ava Farkas? Mary Lathrop? Then Richard Battle and Susie Schripp. Mary Lathrop? Again, thank you so much for your patience. I see you've been here since 3:36.
I could regale you with all kinds of stories, but I know that this is not what we're here for. Criminal harassment. I'm in a stabilized apartment. Fake charges. I really don't understand why the housing court in New York City permits these frivolous cases to continue. But they do, and they know they're frivolous, and they permit them to roll through the courts. You go through the process, you roll through it. Have you got me here with this? But I know that this is not what I'm supposed to be talking about, and it's clear that we need rent stabilization to be strengthened and rents rolled back and tenants protected. Especially elderly, feeble tenants need protection. They need a rent freeze. They need the stabilized prices to be stable. Stabilization should live up to its name. If it's stabilized, stabilize it. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I hope that was audible.
It was very, very audible. Thank you for testifying. Richard Battle, Susie Schripp, and Susan Steinberg. Richard Battle.
All right. Good evening, dear members of the Rent Guidelines Board, dear fellow tenants. My name is Susie Schrapp from St. Mark's Place. I'm a member of the Cooper Square Committee and have served on their board in the past for 7 years. I'm also a Shalom tenant, and despite years of harassment, I've managed to hang on to our rent-stabilized apartment. This is my 13th year before the RGB, and I hope lucky 13 with a 0% increase. In 2002, the Shaloms purchased our building and within 2 years emptied it of its rent-regulated tenants. Today, out of 20 units, 1 is regulated. The Shalom family owns over 140 buildings in Manhattan alone, and all display similar ratios of deregulation. Units that in 2002 used to rent for $800 a month on average, now rent for $3,200 a month. The units were converted from 400 square foot studio or one-bedroom apartments into 400 square foot two-bedroom apartment units that are rented to students who double and triple up. Turnover is great and the building resembles a dorm. During the summer months, some of the units are rented to tourists at approximately $150 a night. That comes out to $4,500 a month. Within 2 years of ownership, my landlord's rental income in the buildings increased by 350%. This does not include commercial income in the building, which increased by $120,000 a year. Despite such hefty increases in profit, the Rent Guidelines Board has approved rent increases year after year, even during one of the worst economic crises since the Great Depression. With this, the RGB has facilitated the elimination of affordable housing, leaving hardworking New Yorkers to tighten belts further and carry the sole burden of increased operating costs. What does such burden look like? Well, I believe myself to have a great job. I have consistently been paying 45 to 57.5% of my gross income. The annual compounding rent increases have been brutal and increasingly more difficult to manage. For example, this year I can't afford health insurance for myself. Forget about vacation or making purchases outside of necessities. I urge the RGB to implement a 0% increase for the next few years, but really believe that a rent rollback is required to slow down the social shifts and disappearance of the middle class. Teachers, police, firefighters, artists, and health and wellness practitioners from New York, they're leaving. As always, thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your testimony. The woman in the back, I think, is a little boy. Susan Steinberg, Linda Campbell, and then Joyce Goodman on behalf of Assemblyman Daniel O'Donnell.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Susan Steinberg, and I live in Stuyvesant Town, my home, for 35 years. I moved in January 1980. Since that time, the U.S. economy has endured 10 mini crashes, downturns, and recessions, some more long-lasting and injurious than others. I experienced 3 major layoffs during those economic downturns. Despite the difficulty tenants in similar situations had meeting their financial obligations, rents inexorably rose. I have a little chart with the tally of the 10 downturns and the increases for 2-year lease. I won't read all of them. I did submit my testimony in writing. Let me just say the range is from 4% to 13%, with several 9%, rather a lot. It is particularly noticeable that in 2008, the year of the Great Recession, the tenants were hit with a significant increase of 8.5% at a time of widespread job loss. The relentless and often undeserved RGB increases are potentially damaging the social fabric of our city. Notwithstanding many crashes, downturns, or recessions, tenant rent burdens have increased to more than 30% of their income, and in many cases, the number is now closer to 50%. Tenants with less discretionary income to spend do not support the many small businesses that serve them. The mass of empty storefronts that ring regulated complexes attest to a city on the skids. Many residents have had to simply pick up and leave or get on federal, state, and city relief rolls to try to survive. We have over-contributed to the real estate industry long enough. It's time to even the playing field. It's time for a rollback or a rent freeze. We look to you to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Councilmember Helen Rosenthal? Oh, can you just one? Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you. Ma'am? Oh, then please.
I live in Brooklyn by Prospect Park.
Can you speak into the microphone? Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I live in Brooklyn by Prospect Park. I've been there like close to 35 years. And I've gone through so many major changes, going back and forth to work, coming home, my bathroom ceiling collapsed. Okay, rats running through the entire building. I've gone down to DHCR, HPD. When they saw my face, they used to call me Hell Date, okay? because I'm always trying to fill out like rent reductions, this and that, to let them come and do the work. When they do come and do the work, everything is patchwork. What they're doing, you don't have to go to college to get a degree to learn how to do. I mean, I could have done a better job. But the deal is, it's like mildew is throughout the entire building, and the older people, I feel so sorry for them because they had like ceiling collapse, water leaks throughout the entire building. And I did a survey too. I called the Department of Plumbing. They said that building have not changed the plumbing since 1929, okay? So it's cracks are just patching and cracks are just patching. And I talked to one of the building inspectors also, and he said that they need to take the old pipes out and renew them with the new pipes. But the rent has been increasing. The lease expired, they increase it, you pay it, but you're not getting anything for it. And I mean, they come and just do patchworks. I feel sorry for the older people because I try to help them out. And just like the elevator, it's 6 floors. If we have 2 different sides of the building, like 35 apartments on each side of the building, and this little boy was ringing for the elevator. His mom was standing there. So she turned her head. She was talking on the phone or something. Then elevator door, he opened it up. He went in, but the elevator wasn't there. He fell right down to the basement. She panicked. She said they said she was a citizen of the United States and whatever. I had no idea what was going on. She panicked. She left and went back to her hometown. But it's just sad. The elevator is constantly, the guy that used to come and do the elevator, I saw him when I was leaving going to work. He looked at me. He said, I'm tired of coming here. He was tired of coming here. The same, and every time they get someone to do patchwork in the apartments, it's always a different person. The landlord doesn't want to pay them, and they just tell them to just go there and do patchwork. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make sense, but when the rent increase, you better pay it. If not, you're out in the street. And I have a very nice apartment, but why must I live like that? You know, I can understand a rent increase if you deserve it. If you can't afford the property, then why don't you sell it? It's just like you get a certain age, whatever, and you're 62, you retire, and you enjoy yourself a little bit. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense. Give it to your grandkids or whatever, but why must I pay for something that I'm not getting back? It doesn't make sense.
Thank you for sharing your story. Councilmember Helen Rosenthal, and thank you so much for...
And I'm not here with staff today, so I have to do a selfie in order to tweet this out.
Should we smile?
I don't know. Smile, laugh, cry. You know, I'm presenting you today, I only have 4 copies, but I'm sure you'll share, with a letter asking actually for a rent rollback. I know it's not on the table, but we wanted to give you a sense of the space that the New York City Council members are in. This is a letter that's co-signed by 16 different members from all 5 boroughs. And what the letter basically says is, given that the landlord books, their finances are not really open, and so therefore we're speculating on what their increased costs are. And knowing that, you know, as they've increased rents over the years, it's not necessary that the Rent Guidelines Board has increased rents over the years. It's not necessarily reflected a true increase in costs, which the Department of Finance estimates to be 11% less than what the landlords have said their costs have been. That's why we wanted to open up the space for a rent rollback. But we know you're contemplating a tiny increase. I hope it's the tiniest of the tinies, if not 0. You should know that in my office we did an analysis of the last 5 years, again looking at the Department of Finance address by address in my district, and we saw that on average we've lost 650 units plus a year of rent-stabilized housing. And, you know, when I listen to this woman who just testified, what I'm hearing is not that the landlord doesn't have the money to do the improvements, but at the end of the day, they don't want to do the improvements, right? They don't want to make these homes livable, and they want their tenants to leave. And you know, you can look at costs and you know, they can claim their costs have gone up, But at the end of the day, the real impact of increasing the rent on the tenants is that it makes it more and more difficult for the tenants to live there. And given that that's pretty much the only effect of the increase, because we've not seen any meaningful improvement in these people's homes, I would ask you to seriously consider, if not a rent rollback, the smallest of increases. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony.